Very good evening, all of you. We welcome for today's talk once again. This is going to be on professional laws for optometrists, which will be presented by Optom Rajesh Vadda sir and is going to be moderated by Ajit Bharadwaj sir. If you have any queries, please comment in the chat section. We will be taking one by one at the end of this session. Yes, I hand over to Ajit Varadha sir to introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everybody. I welcome you all on this forum and thank you very much for joining us and encouraging us with your comments to give it to us on Facebook, on our social media, which keeps us more motivated to come back with this is our fourth webinar, which we have presented to you during the lockdown. To summarize that, the first seminar was on about where to register. The first webinar was on the state council, the roles and responsibility in each state, what they will be doing in each state, where the optometrists are supposed to register, whether they can register in one state or not, and all those questions and answers were first webinar. Second webinar was talked about where we have multiple boards. We talked about various exams an optometrist need to take, talked about common entrance test, talked about your minimum qualifying test for optometrists, and we spoke on educators test, which will be implemented once the council sets in. And the third webinar was presented by Rajesh Vadva, where he talked general laws pertaining to any business, how to start a new business, different kinds of firms, different laws pertaining to state, municipal corporations, and central laws. Today's talk, we are going to be more specific, which we will highlight about the specific laws which are of importance, of which an optometrist must know to protect himself from Consumer Act and safeguard his interest, and what ASPA will impact the profession of optometry. So this presentation will be done by Rajesh Vadva, 40 minutes, and I request you all to say thank you to him, and I would not give much time on his introduction because I don't think he needs introduction with anyone. All of you know him, that he is the something which a phenomenal person, ever ready to help optometry profession. And he was the person who asked or who came up with the idea that optometrist professional should use optom as a prefix. And you can see what his great contribution to optometry has been these years. So I give this mic to Rajesh to talk today's presentation on laws and practice the optometry profession in time to India. Thank you very much, Rajesh.
Thank you, Ajit sir. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having joined in. We will straight away go to the topic, and I would like to share my screen here. Talking on professional law for optometrists in India today, and we have talked about law in a little while earlier, say day before yesterday, and we continue further. As we see here, I had earlier also mentioned I am Rajesh Vadva and I am primarily an optometrist, but I do hold qualifications in law also. So I thought it will be best to combine the two and bring them together. In current series of presentations, 2 days back we completed why should optometrists know the law and what all laws are applicable to optometry practice. Today, we will be talking on what professional laws are applicable to optometrists in particular. I think you have missed out on the previous chapter to this. This also you can understand independently with a very few slides which we have repeated so that the continuity stays and the basic concept stays. So first thing is we should not be scared of the law, which we said earlier also, but we would like to repeat on this. Law is a friend. We must always believe law is a friend, and it is there to help us. Do not look at law as a scary tool which someone has put in to harass you. This is to help us. A child who looks at a face unfamiliar will be scared. But when the child looks at a face at a familiar face, the same child smiles. So let's know the law, make friends with it, and be not scared of the law. We all want to follow the law, but many errors happen because we did not know that we were supposed to fulfill certain obligations. Just like this example which we've shown, that outside the shutter is written no standing anytime. If these two people had read that, they would have stood a little on the side a few feet away and there was no problem with them. Similarly, sometimes we have penalties which are imposed because we had overlooked some obligation long ago. For example, we did not deposit 500 rupees due to us for paying some taxes, and we end up paying 5,000 for delayed payment or penalty. So, by following the established law, we can confidently enjoy our professional and personal life, and we should know the law mainly because in India, ignorance of law is not an escape from consequences. We cannot tell anyone, I did not follow this law just because I did not know the law. That is not permitted as per Indian legal system. So we must know what is relevant to us and we must follow that. Optom should have some basic understanding about 5 legal challenges and aspects for the new practice. We already discussed this, as Rajesh sir has just said. In the last talk, we had discussed constitution of establishment, labor laws, intellectual property rights, and compliance of direct taxes like income tax and indirect taxes like GST. Now, going further, we have to discuss now what does the Allied Health and Health Professionals Bill say, which is coming in, AHP bill, what is the scope of practice, and a few factors associated with this. So going on with this, the Allied and Healthcare Professions Act 2018. What does this bill or act say? These two words have to be separated out, bill and act. The act is yet to come. We are listing the interpretation of the bill. Until it is passed by the parliament, it's called a bill. When it is passed, it's an act. So we are listing the interpretation of this bill, which has not yet been passed by the parliament to become an act. Therefore, this may be considered as the proposed law for the time being. But most often, proposed law becomes the law. So there might be some changes in the final act. Expected time for enactment is next session of parliament. It will be enacted. So consider the upcoming information as almost accurate. We'll be very close to this only when the final bill comes in. The purpose of the bill. Why did this bill come in at all? The purpose is to provide for regulation and maintenance of standards of education and services by allied and healthcare professionals and the maintenance of a central register of allied and healthcare professionals and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. It means all those people who are not MBBS, who are not, BDS like dentists, physicians, all these who were not yet listed, all these groups have to be looked after. They may be either healthcare professionals or allied healthcare professionals. Primary points are regulation and maintenance of standards of education also and service also, and for both allied and healthcare professionals. So anything connected to these also will be covered by the bill. Allied is defined as, if we go through the whole of this definition, which is long, we are going to skip that, but primarily it is includes an associate, technician, technologist, whatever, but the primary words are, these are the people who are meant to support. These are the support people, the allied. And their education could be diploma or degree, but not less than 2,000 hours. This is what is defined in allied, but optometry is being classified as healthcare profession, not as allied. So let this flow out. And we come to healthcare professionals, which will be we, the optometrists. What does healthcare professionals say? Now, a healthcare professional includes a scientist, therapist, or other professional who studies, advises, researches, supervises, provides preventive, curative, rehabilitative, therapeutic, or promotional health services, and who has obtained any qualification of degree under the Act, the duration of which shall not be less than 3,600 hours. So, important thing here we see that he supervises and provides these services. He is not assisting, he is not supporting it, he is doing it. And this will be 3,600 hours. Someone had gone into annotations and put these lines here. Please go there and just undo those lines in annotations. It will be okay to do that, please. So the optometrist will be in this category where your minimum qualification will be a degree. We see this here, a degree, which will have 3,600 hours. But then there is another phrase within this. We are looking at now the ophthalmic sciences professional. Ophthalmic sciences professional is a person who studies eye-related ailments and specializes in management of disorders of the eye, the visual system, limited in scope and complexity as performed by a medical doctor, having optometrists with a minimum of 4 years of baccalaureate degree and ophthalmic assistants with a minimum of a 2 years diploma program in ophthalmic sciences. This again becomes a little ambiguous. In the previous definition, it was said has a degree with 3,600 hours of training. Here, that definition is changed and it says minimum 4 years of baccalaureate. This perhaps will be made same common. They will synchronize in the final act. So there are two kinds of people in ophthalmic sciences, which is optometrist and ophthalmic assistants. Optometrist is having a code 2267, which is the ISCO code, International Standard Classification of Occupation. This is given by ILO, the International Labour Organization. World over, this classifies people according to this coding, and then it is known that what will be their privileges, what will be their pay structure, everything accordingly. So one is optometrist and the second is ophthalmic assistant. So their code is 3256 for ophthalmic assistant and 2267 for optometrist. Now there will be a council in the center which will be having a role, a target to achieve, but implementers will be in the state. Those will be state councils under it or the chapters within every state which will report to the central council. So duty of the central council is to take all such steps as it may think fit for ensuring coordinated and integrated development of education and maintenance of standards of delivery of service under this act. Means the optometrists themselves and the institutions which train them, all those standards will be maintained, for which it will delegate this to the state council. The duties of state councils will be plenty. They will ensure that the main purpose of the central council is well met with. The state councils will enforce the professional conduct, code of ethics and etiquette, and take disciplinary action, including removal of the professional's name from the state register if these are not followed. They will ensure minimum standard of education, courses, curricula, physical and instructional facilities, staff patterns, staff qualifications, quality instructions, assessment, examination, training, research, continuing professional education. They will also look after ensuring uniform entry examination with common counseling for admission, and they will look after the uniform exit licensing examination. There are three more functions which have been listed. They'll inspect the institutions and register allied and healthcare professionals in the state, ensure compliance of all directives issued by the council, and perform such other functions which may be delegated to them to achieve these goals. So state council will be the actual implementer, and the central council will have the implementation policy. Access to the register which the state will be the state register in which all optometrists will enroll. This will be in public domain. It will be accessible to whole public, to any optometrist, to any citizen of India. Anybody can see what it is. Same will be the central register. Central register will be populated by the data from the state register. we as optometrists will interact only with the state register. It will automatically reach the central register. Now, a person shall be entitled to enter the name in the register. He'll put in an application, give the payment of what is the prescribed fee, and should have a recognized allied and healthcare qualification, whatever is prescribed for that particular entry. Now, every person as above who offers his services on or before the commencement of this act within 2 years from commencement will be registering. So after it is enacted and notified, then we will get 2 years to get ourselves enrolled. There doesn't have to be a rush one over the other, that as if your practice has stopped as soon as it comes in. You'll get 2 years to complete the formalities. Renewals will be done every 5 years by paying a fee and also fulfilling the conditions as the state council may prescribe. Foreign qualifications, this question has been coming up. Yes, there'll be recognition and reciprocity. Subject to the provisions of the Act, any corresponding qualification granted by the institutions outside India shall be the recognized allied and healthcare qualifications as may be specified by the regulations. Reciprocity will be facilitated by the central government. What does this mean? Suppose central government, the government of India and government of Germany say, my optometric qualification is this and yours is this, and they are equivalent. Let us recognize each other's qualifications. If both countries agree, yes, India also agrees. If the other country does not recognize our qualification, we will not recognize their qualification. And this will be facilitated by the central government, which all countries have agreed to recognize our qualification so that our practitioners can go there and practice with that qualification. Same will be theirs. So a citizen of India who holds the corresponding qualification referred above shall be entitled to registration under this act in a manner as may be specified. There might be a test, there might be special fee, whatever may be. But yes, once the reciprocity is the foreign, any Indian doing a foreign qualification will also be eligible to. Now, let us not take all this very lightly. If you would recollect in childhood, you might have seen this He-Man saying, I have the power. The AHP Act grants adequate powers to the council to enforce the provisions of the Act. And we will all be, whether you call it force or voluntarily being disciplined, we will be, there's a lot of power in sweet words, but there's more power in sweet words and a stick. So this particular council has a stick in its hand also. Now, for offenses, there are certain penalties. If someone is not registered but falsely represents as registered, then what will happen? First conviction will be with a fine, which may extend up to 50,000 rupees, and on any subsequent conviction with imprisonment, which may extend to 6 months 6 months of imprisonment, or with fine, which will not be exceeding 1 lakh rupees, or with both. Next is, will the complaint go directly to the court? Will someone say, oh, this man has done some malpractice, let me go to the court? No, it won't be so straight. They will have to first complain to the council. The council will then go to the court, and they will be the ones who will make an order, either from central government or state government, or from the council or state council, and they will go to the court, and then the person will be sued. Next is, no junior magistrate will look after this. Looking after the court case, if at all it happens, and there are certain miscellaneous legal issues. No civil court shall have jurisdiction to entertain a suit regarding removal or entry. Someone goes to the court saying, why the council is not registering me, or why my name has been removed from the register. No court will entertain this. This has to be applied to the council, and it will be decision of the council to do that. You can't go to the court saying, why am I not being registered? Government cannot be sued for anything which they do in good faith. Suppose the government does something which is prejudicial, or which is something which was harming you. Say someone, if government suspends somebody's license, and after 5 months it's realized, oh no, that was a mistake, so let him start practicing. So these 5 months have been lost. but government cannot be sued for this. This is another factor which has been put into the court case. Now, this particular law will have an overriding effect. If any other law says that such and such thing will be done in this way, but this particular act contained in any other law for the time being in force, or in any instrument having effect by virtue of any law other than this act. Any other act, it says something else, but whatever this law says will overriding that. So if removed from the register by the council, what can?
Okay, in the meantime, let me, till he comes back, just few of the points I
Yeah.
want to clarify. When he comes back, I'll stop. You see, the
Sure.
two issues mentioned about, one is about 2000 hours of qualification for a diploma. Parliamentary Standing Committee added that besides this 2000 hours, this duration will be broken into 2 years minimum and maximum extending it to 3 years. So a diploma has to be between 2 to 3 years, and it should have a semester system, not that 2000 hours can be completed in 6 months and you can be granted a diploma. Likewise, for the degree, they have mentioned any degree has to be from 3 to 5 years, again broken into semesters. So they have defined what is a diploma and what is a degree. Besides number of hours, there will be number of years, and the semesters system needs to be followed in every allied and healthcare institutions. So these are the two points which I wanted to mention, which clarification came from the Parliamentary Standing Committee regarding diplomas and degree courses.
Yeah, we got Rajesh sir back. He should be live online.
Sorry for the technical glitch. Now, if removed from the register by council, the order will not be implemented immediately. It will be in 3 months after issuance that the order will come into force. But in the meantime, we have a time for appeal, and it will be implemented only 3 months later or until the appeal is settled, whichever is later. So a person can give an appeal up to 60 days from the date of order, and then it will be implemented much later. Now, restoration, on being satisfied, the State Council may restore the name, upload on the website, and publish the in the official gazette that the name has been restored, and also publish in at least one local newspaper also. Bridge between the bill and the act. What will be the bridge? What is it which makes the bill into act, and what are we doing? Several suggestions by optometry were given to the standing committee, and with all these suggestions, they have actually listened to us very patiently, and they have given us very sympathetic ear. And thanks to the leaders who drafted and represented, and we hope that the final bill, final act that will be acceptable to all will come in. That is, professionals will like it, society, government, international community, and public at large will like it. Now, having discussed the AHP bill, let us come to the scope of practice. So this is out. Scope of practice. So far in India, use of drugs is not permitted to optometrists. So we should have drugless and non-invasive practice until certain drugs are permitted under the new act. So usually law is same whether drug is used systemically or topically. You can't say I use ciprofloxacin as topical eye drops. It is same as giving it orally. The law remains same. So we can go ahead to do non-contact tonometry or non-mydriatic fundus examination, but we should not perform applanation tonometry independently. So optometrist can be sued, yes. He can be sued in civil and in criminal both. Civil under the Consumer Protection Act, yes, and for negligence, failure to exercise due care, in criminal. And why do these happen? Nothing to be scared. We are coming to remedies soon, but we must know that a certain electric wire has the current in it, that we must know. So why do these issues happen? Most often, the mistakes we commit are, for example, while fitting contact lenses, we tend to see the eye as a standalone platform. We feel this eye is the only thing which we have to be concerned and concentrating on, without thinking that the eye is part of the whole body, and we must have a holistic approach. So we must have other assessments also. We must see the whole thing. Any other disorders of the eye, or maybe the person is diabetic and we are having a fluctuating a refractive error because of fluctuating sugar levels in blood and similar thing. So we must have a holistic approach to avoid errors. Consumer Protection Act, which is called CPA, this was not applicable to us long time back, say somewhere in before 1995 it was not. In a case, Indian Medical Association versus VP Shanta and others in 1995, Honorable Supreme Court ruled that the patient is a consumer and medical assistance is a service. Thereby, hospitals, doctors, and the like, in the like, optometrists also come. They are all covered by CPA 1986, and few phrases have become more in use since then. You may have heard these words, which are quite similar sounding, although they mean little different, like medical negligence, deficiency of service, professional misconduct, unfair trade practices, vicarious liability. So few types of accusations are, say, what is medical negligence or malpractice? It is breach of duty caused by omission to do something. For example, we did a full checkup for a red eye, but did not record the visual acuity. Now, this is definitely an omission. Deficiency of service, a fault or imperfection or shortcoming. Prescribing absolutely wrong access in high astigmatism. Instead of with the rule, you have prescribed against the rule astigmatic prescription. That's a mistake, and that is deficiency of service. Professional misconduct. Conduct not appropriate for a professional. For example, using abusive language, shouting at the patient, that's not permitted. Unfair trade practices, fraudulent, deceptive, dishonest methods. So all these we don't do normally, so we are safe. Do not worry, but we must know these laws do exist. So it's like promising a lens of a certain brand and dispensing an unbranded lens to the patient. This will not be fair anyways. Vicarious liability. Getting blamed for another person's fault. In our own outlet where we are the senior most, this optometrist is responsible for everything that happens, whether he's there or not. For example, you were away when your staff delivered a wrong packet of contact lenses to the patient. There were two Miss Sunita Gupta, and he gave this Miss Sunita Gupta's lens packet to the other Miss Sunita Gupta without verifying who is who. And we will be responsible vicariously for that. Now, professional law, as of today, professional conduct is very important. We are healthcare professionals instructed in the science of healing, expected to keep our knowledge up to date. Consent from patient, whether implied or expressed, is important. Coming to this, consent is a very big factor in medical practice, in medical legal practice, in our optometry practice also. Is going to be a very, very big thing. Patient's autonomy, that is the patient's right to know and decide about what is being done to his body during medical treatment, is well recognized principle of model law. A doctor cannot proceed in the absence of patient's consent. Consent of patient is presumed in every interaction between the doctor and the patient, meaning as soon as the patient walks in, he has given you an implied consent that he will share with you his private problem of the eye. He has given you permission to touch the eye. He has given you permission to listen to what we call auscultation, listen to any of the sounds of body, whichever comes, all those things. Auscultation and palpation are permitted. But in interventions and treatments which may have serious consequences, consent has to be written. So that is expected, that consent should be there. So keep patient records, diagrams, images, etc. If we cannot produce patient records, it is assumed that this is deficiency of service, and that record is not being produced because it goes against us. So records must be kept. If it is not written, it was not done. That is the simple process what the law takes. We must write all details as far as possible. Keep secrecy of patient information and database. No adverse comments about other professionals should be made in the practice. And responsible for substitution optometrist, meaning if I am going away on a holiday or something else and I appoint another optometrist to work in my clinic under my banner, I'll be responsible for his work also. So, but there should not be any scare. We have rights, and it's good to know the rights. There cannot be a case of medical negligence on the basis of difference of opinion or diagnosis. This particular eye looked to me like keratoconus, but he says, no, this is more towards a pellucid marginal degeneration. Okay, this or this. Well, if we have a difference of opinion or difference of diagnosis, it will be permitted. There's nothing to be worried about. Result of treatment, we went the right course, but the final result was not good, not what patient really wanted, and he could not be treated. No one can sue you for that. Choosing one option over the other, we had two options, whether to take this course or this course, whether to give soft lens or RGP lens. I decided on this. No one can sue you for this. This is your option, your clinical discretion. You can do that as per your knowledge, wisdom. You are a qualified person. Government has given you a degree, a qualification, and a license to do this. Administering new medicines with proper consent and compliance, a new contact lens solution had come in. You take consent from patient, follow the protocol, there'll be no suing for that. Amount of fee charge. Other person charges 200. Why did you charge me 800? Well, that's my fee. No one can sue you for having charged fee, what you have defined. That is never going to be. Why is this so? Because care and not the cure is expected by law. Law does not expect that you will cure the patient. Law only expects that you will be caring for the patient. If your care was okay and you followed all processes, and you are done. You don't have to worry about any legal case against you. There are other defense which are available to the optometrist, and after the council formation, we will have more advantage on these factors, and these are what is called the Boehm's test. Boehm versus Friern Hospital 1957 in Britain is used by courts all over the world, almost Indian courts accept this. This is very simple rule. No prosecution by comparing with the best or ideal or perfect or super specialist, but with an average practitioner. What does this mean? Suppose a person has a 6 months experience in contact lens fitting. He did fit. The fit may be a little different than what a 20-year experienced person will fit. These will not be compared. If most of the optometrists would have done the same, then there's no question about it. Meaning optometrist has adopted a practice that is considered proper by a reasonable body of practitioners. Suppose a court will ask an association, optometry association, this particular person in this condition has given this soft lens and the patient had problem. Do you think it is okay to do it? If that association says yes, most often it is done so. It may or may not be okay to do as per a very super specialist, but mostly that's what we do. And that's all, that's the end of it. If a body says, yes, this is what usually an optometrist does, it will be passed. So Boehm's test is not to compare with the super specialist or the best person in the field. It will compare you with an average, and just if you have an average process in place, nothing wrong will go wrong. Also, we have certain other advantages. I told the patient, oh, I've seen your eye and you have keratoconus, and listening to that word, the patient fainted. Can he sue me? No. Therapeutic privilege is given to me under Indian Penal Code Section 93, communication made in good faith. I had to tell the patient, and patient fainted. That's not my fault. This has been provided to us. Other than this, the Indian Penal Code 1860 provides several other privileges also. For example, yes, we did this, but we have done it with consent and without meaning any harm to the patient. Patient has signed the consent. Here it is. Now something happens. What can we do? So you are protected. Second could be it was done without consent, but in good faith. There was no time to take consent for this, and we thought it's a routine procedure, and we did it. But we did it for his benefit. He's not my enemy. For a child below 12 years or for an insane person with the consent of guardian. I took the guardian's consent, not of the child, because he's only 10 years old, and that should be adequate. And then acts done when compelled by a threat. Someone put a gun on my head and asked me to write the vision to be 6 by 6 while it was only 6 by 36. It was compelled under the threat. So even then you are protected. There's more to it. There was a case called Jacob Matthew versus State of Punjab and another in 2005. The doctor looking after patient took out an oxygen cylinder, but it was empty, and he attempted everything, nothing could happen. And the patient died. The case went to the court, and the court said Dr. Jacob Matthew was acquitted as there was no gross negligence on his part. It was not his duty to keep the cylinder filled in a hospital. So therefore, there was no case for causing death by negligence, and no penalty was put on to him because it wasn't his duty. He did his part well, whatever was required. So this is a landmark judgment. And then the Honorable Supreme Court said, this way everyone is running to the courts. There has to be some guideline. There was no law which told us how will the case go to the court in 2005. I'm saying, how will the case go to the court when a doctor is to be complained against? So what the court does, this judgment and guidelines have given ample protection to medical practitioners. So we have guidelines of the court, but no law as yet. These guidelines are so stringent, it is not easy for anyone to go to the court. You have to have one certification from 2 government hospitals, independent, saying, yes, something wrong was done, and these are competent doctors, and then you go with that and then prove it. The onus will be on the patient to prove that doctor was wrong. And only if there is real gross negligence, then the onus will be on the doctor or on the optometrist to prove that he did not commit any negligence. But when there is no gross problem, it is for the patient to prove that the doctor was negligent, and the doctor's turn to reach the court will come after several years and processes. All foregoing aspects of professional law are to be followed, and these are enforced by Clinical Establishment Act, Registration and Regulation 2010, so far notified only in union territories and few states, and more so in next few weeks we expect Allied and Healthcare Professionals Bill 2018, which was presented in the Rajya Sabha on December 31, 2018, processed by Parliamentary Committee. Content of final bill and its passage by Parliament is awaited. So these are just a few points in law. Knowing them is better than not knowing them. And we wish to be more aware of how the law works. Please do not mark the screen. Okay. We are optometrists, responsible citizens of the country, and are an educated community. We shall abide by the law and tell others to do the same. And let us look at law as a friend. And now the next presentation, which is scheduled for 12th of April at 6 p.m., which is day after tomorrow. Presenter will be Professor Monica Chaudhary and Dr. Seema Gupta. Of course, our moderator will be Majid Bhardwaj, and coordinator will be Oli. And the subject, the topic for that will be optometry education and profession. Where are these going, and what help can I extend? As I always say, I am optometrist first, advocate later. I will be glad to extend free advice on legal matters to my optometry family, be it for check bounce or ISO certification, trademarks, labor issues, writing of will, or any other matter. For any further queries, you can contact me. My contact details are here. And now I'll be passing on to Ajit sir to make announcements for upcoming talks, and then we go on to question and answers. Through Oli, you can write your questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hand by going into participants and raise hands, and you will be invited to ask your question. Thank you so much. I'll be here to answer the questions. On to, off to Ajit sir,
Yes.
as I stop sharing the screen. Thank you.
Summarize the talk, and then we'll go ahead for the question and answer session.
Thank you, Rajesh, for summarizing the AHPA bill in such a short time. And I think only a lawyer and a person of your understanding could understand it better and give it such a clarity to all of us. Adding few points, coming to the issue of diplomas and degrees, Parliamentary Standing Committee has added that 2000 hours of qualifications. It's not just, you cannot finish a qualification within 6 months, but you have to spend minimum of 2 and maximum of 3 years to get a diploma certificate. Similarly, for degree, they mentioned not just 600 hours, but you have to spend minimum of 3 years and maximum of 5 years. And that has to be broken into semester system. So diplomas and degree will have semesters and minimum and maximum number of years besides the number of hours which have been specified in the bill. Coming to the point of whether the optometrist should be able to prescribe medicine or not, Parliamentary Standing Committee especially felt and told Ministry of Health that these people, they have 4 years of education and they must be given right to prescribe the law. The Ministry of Health said that to permit the law, the Parliament has to change the existing law, which is authorized by MCI, that only MCI registered persons should be able to, or the MCI registered doctors should be able to prescribe drugs. So they have to make an enactment of the law in the Parliament before optometrists are allowed to prescribe the law. So Parliamentary Standing Committee has already given advice or suggestion to Parliament that optometrists should be able to advise or should be able to prescribe eye drops and other medications as far as the eye treatments are concerned. Most important two changes which a healthcare profession should be ready. That being in a healthcare, you will be getting guidelines from the council. Guidelines would be regarding how do you open your clinic, what are the number of, like 24/7, you should be available on phone, or there should be somebody taking up your phone. There should be guideline. There'll be guideline, not that a contact lens can be dispensed from your clinic without having any sufficient supply for water, a way of disinfecting those contact lenses so that the infection doesn't spread from your clinic. So all those details will be coming to you from guidelines from the council. Coming back to as Rajesh said, the data and consent, two are very important issues, because EMR, which we call your medical records, electronic medical record, is very crucial for a healthcare professions. There'll be guidelines for how many number of years you have to maintain this data. What will happen to data if you close your clinic? Where the data will be deposited when you are no more in, maybe you die. So all these guidelines you'll be getting from the council. So one has to be ready. Coming to the consent, it's very, very critical when an optometrist sees a red eye. You have to give your qualifications, you have to clarify, because optometrists will have different skills. Some optometrists may be only able to prescribe glasses, and some may be given right to prescribe contact lenses or drugs as the time comes. So you should be able to tell your patient that this is my limitation. If the person says, give me contact lenses, and you are just an optometrist, you cannot give contact lenses to that patient. So you have to explain your limitations of skills. Competencies and skill need to be explained to the patient. The consent has to be taken. If the person is illiterate, don't expect him to sign and give you a consent. Maybe record what you want him to give a consent for, keep that recording, and this is admissible in the court. Today, I see many optometrists, they steal data from the employers. So that is a legal offense. Anybody who is stealing data from an optometrist or from any healthcare profession could be sued or could be sent to a jail. So there is a lot of restrictions. There's a lot of things what we must know. The guidelines for this will be coming from the council. This will be our attempt. Now we have created a forum where we'll be giving you authentic and reliable information as far as your legal, political, educational, and public health policies of the government are concerned. We are constantly in touch with you, and as you are seeing, our aim will be to upgrade the skills of the optometrists so that they can qualify for the MQT, which will be compulsory for your examination to practice or to apply for a job. So MQT skills will be developing. As you have seen, we will be working with you every alternate day till the closure, and maybe we'll be announcing you as the time comes. We'll be working with the educators to develop their skills for education so that they can pass their National Teachers Eligibility Test, and Monica and other resources who are with us They'll be teaching you about methodology and the expected guidelines from the government. It may not be exactly the same guidelines the government may give, but with our experience of working with the different councils, I worked with the World Council, where I worked with so many countries' councils. So we have gathered, we have information, we have human support, we have people, friends helping us with all those logistics, which we'll be sharing to you. At the same time, we'll work with the institutions where we'll give guidelines what a council can come and will expect you to upgrade to have a diploma course or a degree course and master's course. So we will need your support. Stay connected with us, join us, and I leave this to question and answer session, and Rajesh will be glad to answer, and I'll be here with you to reply any query. Thank you very much, and we look forward to your support. Thank you. Over to Oli.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful explanation and information. Now we are going ahead to take questions which arises from different people. So we'll start with Mr. Gaurav Bharadwaj.
Sir, I have a doubt when we say optometrists are not considered as a medical practitioners now, as per the rules. So are we allowed to do orthokeratology or touch retinal corneas for fitting contact lenses? Because these are all invasive procedures.
Contact lens is actually considered to be placed on the eye and not in the eye. So it's being called invasive, may not be in the true sense invasive. Number two is, yes, we are not permitted drugs, and perhaps India is the only country which has listed fluorescein as drug a few years back. Seems to be somebody's personal opinion, because as Professor Brian Holden, when he came to know about this, he said, how can this be? We can, I have request for Mr. Amarjeet, please stop sharing the screen. Press the red button to remove your screen. Press the red button to remove the screen.
I've done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, Professor Brian Holden said, how is it that fluorescein can be a drug? Because we can drink fluorescein and nothing can happen to you. So, putting it, yes, if we go by the strictest of rules, we can't use fluorescein, but this is such a mild and simple molecule that usually no one would have objection to it. You are right if we go for sixth sense, but wait for another few weeks. All this will open up and we'll come to the realistic level of our rights and competence.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Next question is from Monica ma'am. Perfect.
Now? Yeah. So it is, we see across many hospitals that there are optometrists who are prescribing steroids, and we also see optometrists practicing in certain centers, which may be a satellite center or vision center, prescribing steroids and even treating the patients or whatever, glaucomas or whatever. So till now we don't have, and we do not know what will unfold into our prescribing rights. They have a cover of the hospital. What do you think the law would be when all that frames up? And would this optometrist have a cover of the hospital, or he's independently, he can be sued for his negligence?
No, he will not be sued for his negligence, because this will be vicarious responsibility of the head of that institution who has appointed this person there. It is presumed that it is by signature of the head that this is being done. So optometrists can be questioned and all, but liability is of the person who delegated this work to that person.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Next question is from Mr. Kishore Bhandari.
Just like you said, for application tonometry, we can't use fluorescein. Like I think, sir, you just now spoke about fluorescein. Fluorescein we can't use in patients for contact lenses. That's one part. Second thing is also, I would advise, like suppose most of our practitioners, what we do is, whatever procedures we do, we need to have a consent form, whether it's refraction or whatever we do, because we have to explain to the patient what we are trying to do. Most of us, we don't have on record anything or any documentation as such, what we are telling the patients. I don't know if Rajesh sir agrees to that.
See, it may be practice dependent. It's been almost over 2 decades that every contact lens patient we fit, we have been taking a consent. And For orthoptics, we do not. Yes, we could frame one for that. And there are hardly other procedures in which we really need a consent, because most of the other procedures are implied consent. So make it a practice, get a formal consent form created. Many samples will be on the internet. You can meet a lawyer and take a consent form also. Only limitation, only problem with the consent forms is to be absolutely true and that the patient does not refute. We need two people attesting it, or two people witnessing it, which usually is rare and not possible, but at least one we can. And if the child is 12 or more years of age, the child also has to sign on it. Below 12, it's okay, only parent signature may do. But when it is 12 or more for a child, and after 18, you need just the patient signature. That should be done, yes. Any
Thank
other
you,
questions?
sir, for the explanation. Now I'm reading out questions from the YouTube live section. They will be not audible, so I am reading out on behalf of them. So Ms. Vidya Sriram had one question regarding JPMT in some areas, 2 years and 6 months of diploma optometry, whether it is legal or not, valid or not.
We are looking for two kinds of legalities. One is the legality from the post ASV bill, and other is pre ASV bill. As far as the pre ASV bill is concerned, as we have mentioned, that anyone with any diploma in optometry or a relevant or a course which is equivalent will be considered. And if you are in a practice of optometry for a certain number of years, you will be eligible to enter your name in the state register. Regarding what ASV bill says, that any academic institution has to be approved by state or central agencies. It could be UGC, it could be state health board. So post ASV bill, you have to check with your state whether this particular diploma college or degree college is competent enough, is certified by UGC, or is approved by UGC for issuing diploma or degree courses. So you have to check from your state, and as far as present situation is concerned, there is no issue coming out, the students coming out from that institution to register.
Thank you, sir. In continuation with the same question, Mr. Labishetty has raised a similar question. What about the 4 years courses which was offered from Aditya Jyot or Lotus College? What are the validities for those?
One thing a student must understand: when you are undergoing a college or your degree course or post your master's program, as the law says, that your education has to be within the same campus where the university is. The university should be in the same state, and you must attend their classes in the same campus, whether it is theoretical or practical. So you know better whether your institute has a university affiliation which is in the same state. And so I will not be talking about a particular institution, but as a student, as Rajesh said, that you know your law, ignorance of law is an offense. So you should know what is the university which your institution is enrolled, and take the necessary step before you apply for admissions.
No, these are very particular questions related to the certification which are given as a private certificate after 4 years of course work. So that time definitely there was no affiliation with it.
As I mentioned, only government registered institution can provide any certificate or diploma or degree in future. They will be there. They will be the only authenticated to do that. No other private institutions or any NGO can give you any certification for that. And that will not, even if you do it will not be legal.
Will there be any provision for the already people who already got the institution by any chance?
Yeah, they can throw it in the dustbin. They have a choice.
Coming to the next one from Mr. Jitendra Singh. As a practitioner, what is the difference between diploma and bachelor of optometry? He wanted to know in terms of scope of work.
Yeah, the scope will be defined in the HP bill. we already know that number of hours have been defined, where one would be put as ophthalmic assistant or as an optometrist, and their duty and role is yet to be defined. See, the act is actually directive principles. Within the four walls of these principles, all these further committees will have power to make rules, and they will make these rules. Once the rules come out, we will know what is the scope, what is the difference in scope, what is all that a degree holder can do, and what is all that a diploma holder can. Only then a definite answer can be given. Right now, all are equal. Yes, anything else?
Thank you. Next, another question from Mr. Vikas Samal. He wants to know what are the legal documentation required to run a clinical based optical.
The clinic based optical right now, number one will depend on your state. We had listed all these things in the previous session. You can also contact me personally, or you can refer to the YouTube recording, which has already been linked on most of the groups. You will be needing to take permissions and municipal licenses of the local authority. And those are primarily the licenses you need right now. But as the time goes by, we will need a professional license, Clinical Establishments Act, if that is implemented or notified in your state, that will also be required. And there are many other things like labor law, registration, shops, and all those will happen, but only if those are implemented. So primarily at this juncture where we are sitting, whatever we may decide, there's hardly any time to implement, because when the AHP bill gets passed and becomes an act, the real guideline and list of licenses required will be ready and clear to us. Right now, we are in a transition phase. Thank you. Any other questions?
Right.
Can I-
One more very
Yeah,
important
Ajit sir.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
What we know from our experience, that if a person is having an optical outlet and a person is having a contact lenses outlet, he will not be able to have the same kind of guideline from the council. So there'll be guidelines from the council that if you are having just a refraction room, what kind of distances should be, what kind of confidentiality you maintain, what kind of brightness you have in the room. So all those guidelines which we are not following, they'll be strictly followed. The guidelines of the different sets of competencies, as I mentioned, contact lenses, your low vision, will be defined in the guidelines which we will be talking to you about in few days' time. We'll be also talking to you about code of ethics. What kind of code of ethics you mean? When you communicate, your communication has to be in a language which is understandable to the patient. The communication form needs to be in the same vernacular language in the state which is prescribed. So all those guidelines which we are talking about today will be coming out from the council, and we will be giving what different councils are doing at present in different countries. And that's what we said, that we'll be sharing this information as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So before we end the session for today, I wish to take last question of the session from Monica ma'am.
Thank you, Oli. In fact, I wanted to bring in one more thought. That was that if there is a spectacle prescription, we have doctors who are using their license number whenever they have any prescription, even in their clinics. So every optometrist I know will have to put up that license number. What happens in case of spectacle prescription? Is that license number going to be mandatory to be part of it also? And a last thought before I close, because the next session we do, but I would like this answer to be put in first.
See, once the council describes who all are permitted to prescribe spectacles, that person's license number will have to be there. Right now, there are no guidelines on who can prescribe spectacle, who cannot. Every state is handling it differently. Every institution is handling it differently. Once it is defined, then license number will be mandatory on every document written and signed by that particular profession. So whether it is a spectacle prescription or a medicine prescription or contact lens prescription or orthoptic treatment advice, whatever, the license number will be there all the time.
You see, whether you prescribe glasses or contact lenses, I'll tell you, you have to have your license number specified. What happens in US is just that people dial to 1-800 contact lenses to get their supply of contact lenses. It's a very common practice. But what the court says that the agency which supplies contact lenses, he must get the information from the optometrist who has prescribed that this contact lens prescription is not more than 3 months old or 6 months old, depending from one state to another. And only then the contact lens supply of online be made to the patient. So once the guideline comes, it will be strictly followed, and any violation can lead to the imprisonment or the subsequent methods of subsequent punishment as per the applicable law. So the content of the bill is that the profession is unregulated. You have the profession needs to be regulated, and that is why these guidelines are coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think we will be fortunate enough, and we invite everybody for the next session, which is on 12th, because we will be having the insights which Dr. Seema Lal Gupta, who's been there in US, born there, practiced for 16 years. We're fortunate to have us here in India with us, who can give us the background of how optometry evolved in US and how did they evolve into the practicing right to being the best profession in US now. And thank you so much, Rajesh sir, Rajit sir. It was a wonderful session, and Oli, your management is excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for this
Oli,
encouraging word. Yes, Ajit sir.
Just to add to Monica's communication,
Yeah.
we will be taking experiences from US, because just like US, in India also we have optometrists ranging from bachelor's, master's, and diploma, and even the postgraduates. So there has to be a different set of competencies, and how US handled a different level of competencies. In US also, you have optometrists who are just prescribing only glasses. You have optometrists who are just using maybe a kind of diagnostic drugs, and you have optometrists who are doing surgery. So how they handled their system of providing different skills and different kind of certification from every level, that is what we have to know from Dr. Seema tomorrow. I will be joining with another panelist from Australia, and she will be sharing her experience tomorrow about the same issues, how they handle and what they need to do to renew their certificates. So these two speakers, one from US and one from Australia, and Monica Chaudhary and I will be with you again day after tomorrow. That's on 12th. So join us on 12th of April at 6 p.m. again. Thank you very much. Over to Oli.
Thank you all of you for the wonderful engagement and the active participation during this webinar. We look forward for the next session, and sincere apologies for the technical glitch that happened, because all of you know that it can happen any point of time during electronic transmission. So please bear with us, and once again, we look forward to see you day after tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Thank you everybody. Thank you so much.